I mean, obviously, the events of last week were a terrible moment for the community, for the continent. But how much does this make you concerned about the future?
Right. Well, no, I mean, I just got back from Paris, and what's amazing about this is that the Muslim community in France feels, generally speaking, again, generally, aggrieved. There's a colonial history, there's poverty, there's a whole set of issues. However, within that Muslim community are people who are victimizing, quite obviously, another religious minority community, the Jews, who have historically been victimized by the same group of people who were victimizing the Muslims, which is the native French, ethnic French, whatever you want to call it, the right wing especially. So it's a very complicated, and it's paralyzing to people. People don't even know how to talk about this because it's so complicated. So you have Muslims who are victims of a society. You have Jews who are victims of society, Jews who are victims of Muslims. It's a very, very complicated and dangerous mix.
Do you think but you talk about historical precedent. Do you feel, I mean, it sounds like that the anti-Muslim camp and the anti-Jewish camp are no longer the same camp, that they're distinctly different?
This is really, really interesting, and I spent a lot of time, spending a lot of time in the Paris suburbs talking to, mainly in the Jewish community, and what's interesting is these Jews, by the way, are mainly immigrants or refugees from North Africa, Tunisian Jews, Algerian Jews, Moroccan Jews, and they're thinking of voting for parties on the far right, because those parties on the far right are standing against Muslim terror, however they frame it, right? And so the French Jewish leadership, which is mainly inside Paris, is talking to those guys and saying, hey, don't forget, those guys are fascists that you're talking to. And so you see how confused, I mean,
like, in the end, it's not going to serve you that
You think our racial politics are confusing in this country? I mean, it's really deep over there, and like I said, it's paralyzing. So that's what you have. You have these people saying, I'm going to vote for them because they're the only ones talking straight about this problem that we're facing, the problem that manifested itself in the murder at this kosher supermarket.
I wonder how much, you had an interview with Manuel Valls, and he talks about, he says that if the Jews flee, the Republic will be a failure.
Right.
I wonder what you, first of all, let's just unpack that for a second, and then I wonder how much you think that sort of if you are a marginalized Muslim in French society, how much does, and there's a proclivity towards anti-Semitism or feeling that there's a disparity between the way Jews are treated and Muslims are treated, how much does that just confirm their suspicions?
Well, I mean, it might, and there's some Jews who worry when the French government talks like that because, oh, just don't draw more attention to us. What he means is something very, very specific and rooted deep in French history. The French Revolution and the idea of the French Republic was built on a number of principles, and one of the important principles was the emancipation of the Jews, who were second-class citizens, who were discriminated against before the Revolution. And so what he's saying is our ideals, the ideals of the Republic, will be judged, in whether we carry them out, will be judged in part on how we as a country treat this historically persecuted community. The Muslim communities are mainly a more modern community. They came recently, but of course they have their own set of complexities because a lot of those people are, talking about in the Muslim immigrant neighborhoods, are people from Algeria and other former French colonies. So obviously they have their own set of issues about how they're judged.
Let me ask you, the Charlie Hebdo, the next edition, which is going to have a print run of 3 million, is going to have a cover that we're not...
The gunmen did not achieve their goal of
not at
keeping cartoons out.
But, in terms of... this network is not showing those images. There are other media outlets that have decided not to show them. I mean, there seem to be... I don't know what the split is. Some folks think that this is a really powerful statement, that this is a really good thing, and I think that there's a smaller segment of the population that thinks this is, I mean, Egypt obviously has its opinion about this. There are some people that say this just puts more people in harm's way. I mean, talk to me a little bit about whether you think, A, we should be circulating these images more widely in the American media, and then B, your reaction to Egypt's.
Well, look, in the American context, I'm a First Amendment absolutist, and that extends to my consternation or confusion about the way they deal with things in Europe. I mean, in Europe, Holocaust denial is often criminalized. Now, of course, Holocaust denial is despicable, but I don't believe in the criminalization of any speech. I mean, except for obvious, incitement, which gets to your question. When you're calling for the murder of people, obviously you can't do that. And there are people who argue that this is essentially saying, come and murder people because people are so upset. Look, I err on the side of print whatever you want, that we can't censor things because they're offensive. I would say this about our profession, which is that if you're an organization that posts people, journalists, photographers, reporters, in places like Libya, say, or covering the Syria conflict, or in very hard...
Alas, very few post anybody to Syria.
Well, but even in the surrounding area of Syria, thank God nobody's going into Syria at the moment. But you get in the broader Muslim world, you have to make this, and I'm sympathetic to this. You have to make this calculation. Do I want to draw special attention to the easiest way to get back at the organization? You can't necessarily target them in America, but you can target them overseas. So there has to be some sensitivity on that front. But I mean, obviously, my sympathy is with the demonstrators who say, you cannot tell us what to print, even if you hate it. Because everybody hates some kind of speech. Everybody's offended by something in the world, and we can't. The idea of modernity is that satire is permissible, mockery is permissible. That's how democracy came about.
It seems like the decision to circulate the images or not would need to be one that is made in conjunction. I mean, it needs to be a group decision. If you're going to have safety, it's better if the question is these images are incendiary for one news outlet but not for 1,000, then the decision. I mean, much like paying ransoms to terrorists, if we decide to do this together, there is safety in it.
Right. I thought last week when I was in Paris that if all news organizations in the world decide to do it, then you can't kill everybody. That would be the point.
Well, although there are definitely stated goals as such.
Well, they have the aspiration.
The Atlantic's Jeffrey Goldberg. Thanks for your time, Jeff.
Thank you.
Coming up, they agreed on having a college football